Hello and welcome. My name is Allison Ban and I am the Executive Director of CRESS, the Center for Research in Empirical Social Sciences here at McMaster University. I'd like us to begin by giving honor and thanks to the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations as the traditional inhabitants of the lands where McMaster stands. To say that is to acknowledge a debt to those who were here before us and to recognize our responsibility as guests to honor and respect the intimate relationship Indigenous peoples have to this land. This series, Relevant Research, is hosted by the Sherman Center for Digital Scholarship and CRESS, with generous funding from SSHRC, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. Mihaela Gruia is our first speaker in the series, setting us off on the right path by engaging us in developing communications plans. So I hope you're ready to work. She is a social and data scientist passionate about the intersection between research, communication, and design. Research Retold, the research communication service for which she is the founder and director, seeks to make research accessible and positively impacting society. Thank you for joining us, Mihaela.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Alison. I want to say good morning to everyone there. Good afternoon here from the UK. I'm joining you today from the UK. As Alison said, it's going to be a very interactive and practical session. So I hope you're all feeling excited about that, excited about, actually working practically on your research and thinking about your research in new ways. A lot of the feedback that we get from participants in these workshops is that it's an oasis to think about your research and to just reflect on what you're working on. And that's a precious time that we're offering today. So I wanted to say hi. You can see my face here. I am here. Most of the time I'll be hidden behind my presentation, but I wanted to smile to all of you, and I'll be sharing my screen and we can start the session. And just to wake us all up, we're going to do an icebreaker poll that should be popping on your screen right about now, asking you a few questions. What is your hot drink of choice? How are you feeling this morning? Have you attended a virtual workshop on Zoom before? Have you watched the video, and have you downloaded the worksheet? So if you could all take a second to answer the poll that is now popping on your screens, that would be excellent. Let's just end it here and share the results with everyone. So most of you are coffee lovers as opposed to tea. Here in the UK, we pretty much always get tea as the majority hot drink of choice. How are you feeling this morning? A bit tired, but excited. I think we can all resonate with that feeling of feeling a bit tired in these times, but I'm glad that you're all excited for this session. We have 6 people today that have never attended a Zoom workshop before, and I asked this question because we'll be going through a few housekeeping rules and just making sure that you all know how today is going to run. Almost even split. Most of you have watched the short video, which is great. If you haven't, don't worry, we'll still cover in brief some of the key points from that short video. You can watch it afterwards. And then most of you have downloaded the worksheet for the session. If you haven't, you should have received the link to download it from Michelle before. So if you can take a moment to do that, that would be great. It's not absolutely imperative, but it will just help you throughout the session to understand and process the material a lot easier. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that now. So a few housekeeping. Alison mentioned some of these, but during the presentation, during the workshop, we'll have a mix of listening and engaging activities, and the worksheet acts as the place where you can put in notes and thoughts that you have for the topics that we'll be discussing. And there will also be some activities and exercises that I'll be asking you to do today. Please keep your mic off, video on if you want. It's always nice to see who's on the other end of the screen rather than looking at 25 different black boxes. So I do appreciate if you put your video on. When I ask a question, you can use the raise hand feature to answer, and you can find this raise hand feature on the participants. If you click on participants, that should be a raised hand feature there for you. There'll be a Q&A at the end, so you can add any questions that you have in your notes on page 3 of your workbook. And if you have any technical issues, just exit the workshop and re-enter, and you should be good to go. Now, during the exercises themselves, if I call on you, please just turn your mic on and your video on to join the discussions. And I will be putting these icons on for the slides just to make sure it's easier for you to navigate the content when you can raise your hand, worksheet, and then the breakout room. So this is the workshop worksheet that I sent to you. It's a very short document, and it will be using that today. Right, so this session about communicating research and the content that I'll be sharing with you today, the information that I'll be sharing with you today is based on collaborations that we have had with over 60 projects with researchers across the UK and outside of the UK. And all of these projects have in common the need to communicate their research to non-academic audiences, to people outside of academia. And this is really how we've helped researchers turn long research reports into visual and accessible documents that communicate their ideas in easy to understand ways. Now, this collaboration that you are joining today, it's been in the works since January, and Michelle got in touch with me actually in January 2020, talking about whether I'd be willing to run a full day workshop on designing a communications plan. Now, our plans looked a lot different in January 2020 than they are today. I was very excited at the prospect of traveling to Canada and delivering this workshop for you. But alas, here we are. I am actually here in Leeds. This is what I can see outside my window, the autumnal, beautiful scenery, and it's afternoon here. So instead of the full day workshop, no one wants to be on Zoom for 6 hours. We have decided to put together an interactive series on research communication with a short video, a short session, another short video, and another short session, just to make sure that we don't Zoom anyone out. And today we are doing that where we talk about the central message of our research. So we will be covering the following things. We'll be talking about the benefits of communicating our research beyond academia, and also sharing with you some insights about how to communicate to different audiences. So we'll cover a range of audiences. Then we'll also have a little break and then talk about the central research message and challenge you to actually craft this message for yourself. We'll be having a Q&A, a feedback form, and a raffle at the end. So the purpose of spending this hour and a half with me today is to help you articulate that central message of your research. And that is usually a challenge for researchers because they get bogged down into the detail of their work and not take that step back and think, what is the message I'm trying to send? Brilliant. So let's start by talking about the benefits of communicating our research beyond academia. And this is the 6-minute video that we put together for you. I'm not going to play it today. But one thing that I want to discuss with you today, for those who have watched it, for those who haven't, the key reasons for communicating research beyond academia that I cover in that video are that of increasing the visibility of your work, being able to stay in control of the narrative and fighting misinformation and making sure your research is represented accurately. The fact that the world needs robust evidence bases for decision making, and researchers are in a prime position to be able to offer that evidence. If you communicate your research well, you have the opportunity to stand out from the crowd. And finally, it maximizes the impact your research has in the real world. So I want to hear from you, which of the 5 reasons did you resonate the most from the video? So if you want to raise your hand and turn on your video and let me know which reason you resonated with the most. So anyone like to go first, that would be great. Let's see, Alicia, thank you for being the brave first person to talk today.
Mine's kind of a combination, but I think that they are linked. So it's maximizing the impact of my research, but increased visibility of the work as well. They kind of go hand in hand to me.
Right. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Let's see, Sabine, yes? Sabine, we can't hear you, so if you might need to unmute yourself. There we go.
I was having my cereal, so
No,
increasing visibility of my work, standing
Mhm.
out from the crowd, and maximizing the impact of my research.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's see who else would like to talk. Ronak, yes?
Hi.
Yes, yeah, Ronak, we
Uh,
can hear you.
To me, it should be the last one. I mean, all of them are important, but the last one, because I usually do my research based on the personal experiences that I have. And so I would really like it if it actually has impacts on the audience.
Absolutely, that it helps people in the real world.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ronak. Anyone else would like to share why are you here today? Why did you decide that a session like this would be helpful for you? Elaine, go ahead.
Hi. For me, because of the problematic nature of my topic, it would have to be stay in control of the narrative.
Very important. So you could anticipate ways in which your research could be misinterpreted or miscommunicated. So you can take control of that. Yeah. Excellent. Anyone else? Let's see. Aubrey, would you like to share why?
The only one I could think of was to increase the visibility of my work.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. And then one last person. Oh, we've got someone who raised a hand. Neil McLaughlin. Yes, Neil.
Yeah, for me, it's also the staying in control of the narrative, a very kind of controversial and easily misinterpreted topic. So I'd love to hear some thoughts about that.
Super. Yeah, I mean, in terms of thoughts about that, that's one of the reasons mentioned in the video around, if your research is misinterpreted by the media, and if people do then go to search your name and search the topic of your research, what information can they find that they can access and then read that is easy to understand, easy to digest? You can imagine being faced with a journal article that is behind access barriers is not going to be a good place to then go and clarify any information. People just won't be able to access it and actually read it, but even if they might read the abstract, the language might not be very accessible in and of itself. So the reason why I talk about communication in that context is that you can actually, on your academic profile, include a document that can clarify some of those misinterpretations. So we've got Jojo and Lindsay. Thank you for raising your hand. Jojo, if you can share some answers.
Yeah, no, I work in a library in digital scholarship services, and I'm interested in this partially to help grad students think about paths outside of the university, sort of alt-ac directions. So like how to communicate your research as a way to make yourself visible, not only your work visible, but yourself visible for a wider audience than your academic field.
Absolutely. So take it outside of the academic bubble. And then we've got Lindsay.
Hi.
Hi, Lindsay.
So I provide, I'm a research advisor in clinical department of pediatrics at McMaster. So I support lots of investigators in their research. So I selected 4 of the 5 that resonated most for me. Around increasing the visibility of work, evidence for decision-making, standing out from the crowd, and maximizing research impact. And I guess the reasons for those are because I'm helping investigators who are, wanting to impact care of children. They're trying to build their own academic careers. And then from a departmental sort of PR perspective, we're trying to communicate out what we're doing and where we're leading. So lots of it resonated with me for sure.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And then finally, we've got Moyo as well. Moyo, if you could share your reason, and then we'll move on to the next section.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I think for me, the reason would be providing evidence for decision making. And that being that I'm in economics, and whatever we do there, we kind of have to, have good evidence for policymakers to make the good decisions and things like that. So I think that one stands out for me the most.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And yeah, now, especially now, we can see how researchers can play a huge role in supporting decision making and providing that evidence given the current context. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lindsay and Moya, for your contributions. So in the workbook, I talk about we know this is important. We know the reasons why we would like to do it. And in the workbook, I asked you a few questions around any benefits or obstacles that you might face. And so for the next 8 to 10 minutes, I'd like to put you in a breakout room for you to discuss. You've got your worksheet. You may have already answered this question already in terms of how would this actually help your career, your academic career, or the role that you are in to support researchers, and what obstacles might you face? And then we'll come back together as a group and then discuss some of those benefits and obstacles. Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us again. So we were discussing in the breakout rooms the benefits and the obstacles. So would anyone like to share some of the insights that came from their group? If you want to raise your hand, that would be excellent. Any insights that came from your group around common problems that you find, common benefits, common obstacles that you discussed? Pam, go ahead.
Sorry, it just took me a second to find the unmute button. So
great,
we had a great discussion, and I think what came across loud and clear was at first we started using a term, and we weren't understanding the term, all of us. So that was just a language barrier. We talked about lack of time. We talked about the need to be our own marketer and how do you stand out when the next generation are all talking about being influencers. We talked about taking what we were traditionally taught to do in terms of messaging and making sure that we provide context and give all the additional supporting information. This next generation too is taking your message to a bite-sized piece rather than having that fulsome description that we put into the journals. And time to learn the technology and use it effectively. And I don't know if anyone else wants to add in, but we said new thinking was necessary, and just what does that look like and sound like?
Do you mean new thinking around communication? New thinking around how you communicate
communication to the traditional way that we've been thinking about it.
Absolutely. And I mean, yeah, we'll talk about that more. I want to give more opportunity for people to contribute before I answer. Anyone else would like to share perhaps any obstacles or common challenges that you have found in time? Excellent. Brilliant. Let's see. Perhaps, there you go. Alicia raised her hand. Go ahead, Alicia.
Yeah, I think we were talking about kind of the obstacles. Some of it's how do we, again, like Pam was talking about, how do we distill the language, academic language, into something that's accessible to the general public? But also we talked about what do you prioritize and how do you effectively communicate that urgency to get immediate change, right? Especially when it's happening right now and you don't want change to happen. Yes, you want change to happen 10 years from now, but how do you get change happening right in the moment? So about communicating why it's helpful, a lot of it is we're working with individuals or communities. So it's important to have their stories told and their stories heard.
Yep. Anyone else have that problem around what to communicate, around what to prioritize? I joined some of the breakout rooms, and I will do that throughout the session. So don't be scared if you see me. I just want to hear what people are talking about. But anyone else had that issue around how to prioritize which problem to talk about? Because later in the session we will challenge you to talk about that central key message of your research, which will inevitably include talking about a problem. So anyone else think about how to choose the problem that you want to talk about, or having trouble choosing? Lindsay Goddard, yes?
Yeah, I experience that a lot because I'm support staff for a research institute. We have lots of different researchers, across disciplines. I think had some other colleagues in here in that situation, and you can write a summary of the work, but what is none of us, a lot of us, we can write summaries, but we don't have a training in storytelling, journalism. Like, what's the right message to pick that will have impact? What will engage people into the work? It can be daunting to figure that out.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you talked about. And that's a question I get a lot from researchers around how to choose that message, because it's not about condensing the 100,000 words into 20 words and being, the success to that communication is making sure that you've communicated the right message. And I always tell people to reverse engineer from the audience that they're trying to reach, right? So, and we'll be going through that. We're going to go through a series of audiences for you to think about. But that's really how you can start to put some concrete thought into how to choose those messages, right? You have to imagine that you are having a conversation with your ideal stakeholder, and then that person, you've got 5 minutes of their time, and they have afforded you that opportunity to convince them or to share. You don't necessarily have to convince them, but at least just like show them your perspective. So reverse engineering from that and thinking, what do I know that I can tell this person that will make them say, I get it, or this applies to my day-to-day work, this applies to my research needs, for example. So we'll be going through more of that in a bit. But anyone else have any other obstacles? Why would you maybe not have the capacity to do this, or why would communicating be hard for you to do? Anyone else struggle with some of the challenges? Hopefully throughout this series we can help you overcome those obstacles. Let's see if anyone else would like to raise their hand. If not, I'm going to choose, there you go, Ronak. Yes.
Sorry, this is something personal. It didn't came from our group. Is that okay if I share?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I was telling my group mates that actually I study gender studies, and one of the I don't know if it's an obstacle or just a problem, I don't know, but when we want to do a research that involves lots of audience, actually there is a problem to include the terms in gender studies, because it's actually it's kind of evolving every day, if I may say, and it is, we have to explain everything like a lot, and I don't know how we can do that. Like, for example, we do not use LGBTQ plus right now, we say 2 is LGBTQ plus. And for example, for us as students, we took like 7 hours of a course just to learn about the abbreviation. So yeah, so I think
I think that's an interesting challenge around, the word that you use, from an academic point of view. You can use the absolute very rigorous term to describe a topic, and you can feel satisfied that you have covered all grounds, but then there's meeting people halfway to how they communicate and how they describe these issues in their day-to-day work. And I mean, I think that's a challenge that that can only be overcome by trying to understand how the audience that you're targeting, what language did they use that they will understand what you're saying. And I know it's probably not always going to be that all-encompassing term all the time, but at least you're meeting them halfway to start that conversation with them. Absolutely, not jargon, but academic terms, can be an obstacle in the sense of communication. And then finally, we've got Lindsay. Lindsay, if you'd like to share your thoughts, and then Lindsay Akron, and then we'll move on to the next section. Lindsay?
Sure. I think that, for a lot of academics, the skill set around communication in different ways than what is traditional, it's a specific skill set, and not everyone has it. It takes a lot to develop that. And so I think that that's a barrier, and I think often we reach out or try to outsource some of that work where we can, because it's not a skill set that everyone has. So it's something I think that needs to be learned. Another piece I think in academia is that not all communication is reflected or rewarded in our structure of academic currency. So I think some people tend to focus on the things that are going to be bean counted as they're trying to progress academically.
Career progression, yeah.
And so I don't think it's always recognized or rewarded appropriately within the system. And I think that's a barrier, for sure.
It's interesting to see that, you know, even across the pond in Canada, you're facing similar challenges, but here in the UK, it's the same in terms of communication isn't necessarily linked to career progression and kind of very clear milestones that you're achieving. It's more of a, it's something that you do because you care about your research being implemented in the real world, and you go that extra mile. And you know, some research grants and research opportunities do encourage and provide funding for that, but it's not always, you know, a priority. And in terms of skill sets, I mean, absolutely, what researchers are best at is actually going into the detail and the methodology and all of that rigorous process which we need. And it's a question of knowing a little bit of this communication skills to then maybe not do that communication themselves, but also, you know, when they're engaging with research support staff, like we have some on our call today, can they bridge that gap? Can they communicate just enough for that person to know what they need, or give them that enough information for that research support staff to understand and then take that next step in terms of communication? So it might not be that they do it full way, but they can at least be confident to meet with someone who can help them. Brilliant. Thank you all for your contribution. So I promised that I'd talk to you about some, so we had that discussion. Promised I'd talk to you about some audiences. So in our collaboration with researchers here, you know, they usually come to us and want to engage with a variety of, and I say here, non-technical audiences, because academics talking to other academics is usually something they're good at. So we're talking here at non-academics specifically. So let's start by talking about the general public. And it might be, and at the end of this, I'll ask you a poll to ask you, you know, which audience are you primarily focused on working with? But, you know, if your research has that application in people's everyday lives, how would you go about communicating that to someone, a member of the general public, who would benefit from learning about your research and your findings? So here are a few questions that I always like to ask researchers and prompt them to think about. And these, you know, should be at the back of your mind when you are communicating with the general public. So the first one is, and arguably probably for all audiences, but particularly with the public, why should people care? How is this going to make a difference to their day-to-day life? And, you know, you really need to think about this and then be able to articulate how it relates to their life. How is it going to improve what they're already doing, and for them to be able to engage with it? And what is the story you're trying to tell with your research? So I think, you know, someone mentioned now in the conversation around storytelling as a skill set that you might want to be trained in. Actually, we tell stories all the time to our families, to people that we engage with all the time. So thinking about telling that story of your research and embedding it into a context of everyday life is going to really make sure that you're stepping back from that jargon that you might be using that you're already desensitized to, and then you're trying to find that everyday implication. So just to give you an example, we've worked with researchers here at the University of Sheffield in the UK on this concept of social prescribing, which is, you know, sounds very technical. It's basically when health professionals are referring patients to support in the community. So voluntary services that they can help with various things like debt, any social issues, health issues they might have. And this type of concept can be usually explained or described in this kind of diagram, the one used here by NHS England. But the researchers that we worked with knew that if they wanted to communicate this to the general public, they needed to choose a different format, that it's not going to be well received or understood or engaged with if they're going to present it like this. So together we created a comic book format in which that struggle to fix a problem in people's health and well-being was being illustrated here with the metaphor of a mountain that is hard to climb, but with the help of a local health worker that's giving them support and guidance, this challenge is easier to overcome. Now, I'm not saying, you know, you should create comic books every time you talk to the public, but it's just thinking about your research in a different way, thinking about a different format. You know, it's completely different than a journal article, but actually, what is that metaphor that I'm trying to get across here? And so maybe using this format can help. Now, communicating to the public closely aligns with how we communicate with the media. So I'm going to launch a quick poll now to ask you if you have ever heard of The Conversation. So there should be a poll coming up on your screen right now. Have you heard of the conversation? Do you know what it is? So actually, majority of you do not know what the conversation is. I will tell you what it is. Some of you do know, and actually some of you have even written for the conversation, which is exciting because then you can share your knowledge after the workshop. Perhaps you can get in touch and ask for some advice. But let me tell you what it is, because I think it's important to have this conversation. It's pun intended, the conversation around what the conversation is. So let's stop sharing that. I think if anyone who's just joined us, if you can mute your microphone, please, that would be helpful. There we go. Okay, so the conversation is actually a news outlet. Let's say it's an outlet where only academic researchers can publish in. And on the screen here, I'm showing you a screenshot from McMaster University's profile on the conversation. If you go to theconversation.com, you will see that McMaster University is part of this group, and this is, it's a significant amount of money that is being paid by McMaster University to be part of this league. And what this offers you is you as an academic researcher can submit a pitch to write an 800-word article in the conversation about a topic of your expertise. And so here on the right-hand side, yes, Pam, I'm glad you learned about this, because this is a great opportunity for anyone who is looking to exercise that communication muscle and to go at communicating their research in an accessible way. You can benefit from that support, and you can actually submit a pitch to people at the conversation. So if you're interested to know more, I'm sure we can get more information to you about how you can pitch, but this is just a starting point. And someone in the comments, it has become increasingly hard to make a pitch. The conversation goes, okay, that's good to know. Petra, thank you for sharing that. I wasn't aware of that for McMaster University here in the UK. It's still very much used, but I want to at least share with you, if you can't write for the conversation, at least share with you some of their thinking behind how they actually think about writing for an outlet similar. So we've got in the comments here, Neil McLaughlin said, I've done 4 of the pieces worth doing. So you can actually search Neil's pieces in the conversation, search his name, and you'll find his article. So I've been in touch with Holly Squire, commissioning editor here in the UK, and I've asked her, what do you look at when you review these pitches and when you look at the way researchers present their work? What are the kinds of things that you look for that they could think about themselves? So here she says, think about how you'd explain your research to a friend, family member, or even someone at the pub. Your work needs to feel accessible to a general audience. Think about that story you want to tell and what you can relate this to that will help people understand your work. So these are questions that editors think about, and you can also start looking at your work in this light. Think about ways in which you can communicate it in ways that are accessible, similar to what we're hearing here from Holly. Now, what about public sector? So here I'm referring to local government or policymakers, people, civil servants, people who work in policy. So how would we communicate with them? And often the misconception that I hear from researchers is to say that because they plan to talk to policymakers, that they need to be or use that technical language that they are used to. And actually, I want to share with you here the insights from a fellow academic at the University of Cardiff, who talks about the extensive experience of communicating to policymakers, to present research clearly to reach policymakers, to avoid that technical language. Just because they are policymakers working in that field, it does not mean that they are familiar with that jargon or they have necessarily that technical expertise. So here I'm going to give you an example of a project that we've done with Department for International Development here in the UK. We created this series of visual documents, 4-page visual documents, to discuss the key findings from several aid programs that they were launching. And so showing you the way in which a large government department like DFID communicates should give you confidence that you can present findings in visual ways to those who work in policy. So 2 more audiences I'll cover. Let's talk about the private sector. So if you have, if your research lends itself to communicating to businesses, or businesses could benefit from engaging with your research, how would you go about talking to them, industry practitioners? So here I want to share with you the insights of Tony Carroll. He's the business development manager at the University of Warwick here in the UK, and he shares that my #1 tip for researchers when it comes to engaging with businesses would be to keep it simple, KISS. If you wish to maximize your appeal, more detailed analysis can always be used as a follow-up once businesses have expressed an initial interest. So the idea here is that you can always add more detail to what you are going to say, but actually businesses are the kind of audience that would want to know the headline, the most important message that applies to them in the business context, and then they can always ask you for more information afterwards. So the key really is to offer enough information to get them interested and curious, and then start that conversation and then share more information as they requested. And so here's an example of policy briefs that researchers at the University of Warwick are developing specifically for this reason, to engage with businesses. And so they're doing these 4-page documents. Of course, 1 page is just the cover page with the short exec summary. But in these documents, they're explaining, what are the implications of, for example, Brexit on certain legal aspects for businesses. So creating these short, concise documents and then using them in their engagement with business is really maximizing their chances of their research being understood by those in the local community. And finally, we've got the third sector. So here I'm talking about NGOs, charities, how do they communicate? Is there something we can glean from the way they communicate their work that we could adapt to our own research? So here I want to share with you the insights of Harveen Kaur. She's the MEL manager for Fair Trade International. You've probably seen if you eat bananas or drink tea or coffee that is fair trade. So they have transformed very text-heavy reports into sharp and easy to understand visuals for internal and external communication. So here's an example of an infographic that we created for them that take the key findings of long reports. I'm talking 60 to 80-page reports about the impact that they're doing in producer, or they're having in producer organizations. They choose to produce these formats that are short, easy to understand, focus on maximum 5 findings, and use as many visuals as possible to communicate their findings. Okay, that was a lot of me talking. I want to hear from you now around what audience are you most interested to engage with? And I understand that today we've also got people that support other researchers. Perhaps you can share some, it's going to be a multiple choice, but what audiences have you heard those researchers want to engage with? So a poll should be popping up on your screen right now. Is it general public, public sector, private sector, third sector, or media, or other? I don't know, there might be others that we haven't covered. So most of you, 18 out of 22, are looking to engage with the general, so 82% looking to engage with the general public. Actually, yeah, it's multiple choice, so I was trying to do the math. So most of you are looking to engage with the general public, so you need to kind of go back to those questions that we were discussing around bringing it to that everyday life, really think about that story that your research is telling. And we've got an even split between public sector, so civil servants, policymakers, and the media. So getting some insights into how journalists communicate, and also, removing that technical language when we're engaging with policymakers, third sector, and then some of you even businesses as well. So I hope the insights that I shared with you were useful. Okay, it's been an hour now, and we started just a little bit late while we did that housekeeping, so we will probably go over 5 minutes, but I'd like to give you all just a few 2 to 3 minute break just to get up from your seat, stretch your legs a little bit, and then we can come back in 2 to 3 minutes time. Just grab a glass of water, and we'll see you very soon. Brilliant. So let's go back to my screen. So we had a little break. We're going to focus the next 20 minutes really to talk about the central message of your research. And I want to hear from you actually, if you've ever, I'm going to launch a poll now, if you ever had the chance to, ever needed to communicate your research in a very short period of time. So a poll should be popping up on your screen right now. Were you ever at a presentation or a competition even, or an event where someone asked you, what do you work on? And if you knew that if you didn't respond clearly or in an articulate way, they will just kind of glaze over and their eyes will just get lost as you're talking about your research. I know that I have to do that all the time when I'm asked what my business does, what projects I work on. So it's a skill to develop for sure. Perfect. Let's share the results. Most of you have. That's great. It means you're going to be really having an easy time with the next exercise. You're already familiar with how to do this. But for those of you who haven't, what is the purpose of knowing how to do this? So I mentioned in the video and at the beginning of the session that we help researchers produce these kinds of short, digestible material based on their research findings. And at the basis of all of these projects, in our collaboration with them, we always challenge them to think about, obviously, first who their audience is, as I've just done with you. We go through those questions and think, okay, who are we trying to target? And then once we identify that, we say, okay, well, what is that key message that we want to send that audience that's going to get them thinking or make them have even a light bulb moment and say, oh, I see how this applies to what I do. And so that central research message informs all of the work that we do, and it's shaping up the content, because then you're using that as a filter to then say, well, I don't need to include this. I don't need to. You're using that as a filter to target your communications. So over the next 10 minutes, I'd like to put you in pairs and get you populating your worksheet. This is page 3. You've got a text box in there, and these are some questions. You don't have to answer these, but these are some questions that would prompt you to answer and include in your 60-second pitch. So what is the problem or the context in which your research is operating? Why should people care? And by people here, I guess you could tailor it to your audience, right? Why should the general public care? Why should businesses care about this particular problem? And then how are you as a researcher? So as you can see that you're talking about what you're doing really in the third question, not the first question, because we're trying to first understand the bigger picture. Why should your audience care? And then we get to talking about how you are answering and solving that problem. It's just a bit of a different way to think about your research. So I'm going to put you in pairs right now. So at this point, I'm going to allow a few minutes for anyone who'd like to volunteer and share their 60-second research pitch. And then I'll also take some notes and give you some feedback, again, as a non-technical person that can hear your research. So anyone would like to go first? I usually give people an opportunity to volunteer before I'm a kind host before I select. So if you'd like to go ahead, you can raise your hand. There's no right or wrong. It's just an opportunity for you to talk about your research in a different way. There you go. We've got volunteer Ying. Thank you for raising your hand. You let me know when you are ready, and I'm going to set the timer for 60 seconds. So you just let me know. Are you ready?
Okay.
Okay, let's go.
My project is to create a digital exhibition of selected articles from 2 Chinese community newspapers in Canada. And the digital exhibition also include the interview of the newspaper chief editors and historical photographs and communication letters from the Canadian chief press censor during the First World War period. Why these 2 Chinese community newspapers are important for researchers? Because both of them together cover almost 100 years of Chinese community immigration history in BC. And then there are in the historical narration, there is a gap we kind of find in terms of the main media cover the community from their perspective. However, there is no voice or silence from the community. So we translate the newspapers selected articles, and so that the voice could be heard now. And we wish to use this. You can use this opportunity for the whole public and to be able to understand a lot of issues, not only historical issues, but also issues in our current community and situation. So the histories come back. There are a lot of stories happened in past, and then you see the similar events happened now. So that's why we need to care.
Thank you very much. Slightly over the 1 minute, but very clear. And I was able to make some notes and I'll give you some feedback in a second, just seeing if anyone else would like to share. Thank you so much, Ying, for being the first one to go. I know it's not easy. There we've got Sabine. Yeah, go ahead. Our second volunteer. Let me know when you're ready and I'll start the timer.
Okay, I haven't written anything, but I was just thinking through this while I was listening to Yin. So here we go.
Amazing.
The context is there are lots of uncontrolled architecture and urban developments happening in the Emirate of Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. And why should people care? People should care because it's affecting their social fabric. It's posing challenges on how they interact with the physical environment that is surrounding them, how they physically interact with each other, and how communities are being broken down and dispersed and displacing people that actually used to live together for generations, but are now breaking down simply because new developments are taking place, and there's a clear delineation of two groups of people within the Dubai society, the expatriates and the citizens of the Emirate. How am I going to solve this? I'm not here to solve anything. I can't do that by myself, but I am here to present potential solutions and recommendations of how the process and how these issues can be addressed. I'm probably under a minute.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was 1 minute and 10 seconds, so very good. I was able to take some notes as well. Thanks so much for volunteering. We also have another brave participant, Ronak. Yes, if you'd like to let me know when you're ready and I'll set the timer.
I'm ready.
Super.
Okay, my research is about immigrants who are homestayed in France, and the violences, the mistreatments that they experience from the host family. How I came up with this subject was that I had personal experiences. I live in France, and actually I had many friends who have been in the same situation. So I decided to contact many agencies who work with immigrants. None of them accepted to help me, but one. And with their help, we actually prepared a survey. We gained some participants, and we saw that yes, it is considerable in France. Why should people care? Because we see that there are lots of people, especially from developing countries, who are immigrating to, for example, Europe. And many people do homestay because it is cheaper and they want to be familiar with the culture. And they have no idea about the possible harms that they can face. So my addressee is the public and the agencies as well, because I think the research can help both ways.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sabine. Thank you so much, Ronak, for your contribution. So we heard from Ying, Sabine, and Ronak. I'll open the floor to one more volunteer, and anyone like to take the opportunity? Hey, we do have someone. All right, Pam, and then afterwards I'll give feedback to the volunteers who shared their research. So yes, Pam, let me know when you're ready and I'll set the timer.
I didn't really mean to push the button, but I'll try this. So I did raise it.
You didn't mean to raise the button.
Well, I was kind of hovering and then it just went. It must be a nervous thing. So what I said was long-term care in Canada is in a critical state and will continue to face additional challenges moving forward, including an increase in bed shortages, increased rates of dementia for those that are in the long-term care facility, and a lack of nursing and support staff. So my research seeks to develop and test strategies to support leaders in order to develop their ability to respond to crisis, to develop their own personal resilience and organizational resilience in order to in order to provide support and therefore attract new RNs to these positions of leadership in long-term care, and to retain experienced RNs with the intent of improving their work life experience as well as resident outcomes.
Excellent, thank you so much. I don't think I caught what RN stands for. Is it?
Oh, sorry, registered nurse.
I thought it was something with nurse, yes. But there we go, registered nurse. Did you say that? And just out of curiosity, did you say what RN stood for? Maybe it was just me, I didn't catch it.
No, no, I did that. I kind of assumed everybody knew what an RN is. Good catch.
Yeah, I thought because I was really paying attention, taking notes. I thought surely did I miss what RN stood for? So that's a live example of assuming that people know what the acronym is. All right, thank you so much. That was brilliant. That was just 1 minute on the dot. So just a few. Obviously, everyone who heard the pitches can kind of reflect on their own research and see what aspect of each of these pitches you liked that you could maybe take for your own research. But I was able to take away from Ying that the key, the power of her research and the key message there is that she's actually giving a voice to the Chinese community, through this digital exhibition that she is putting up. She is giving a voice to this community, 100 years worth of history, and that now that is going to be showcased. And so I thought the way you explained the research was very clear, Ying. And it was very clear to me exactly what you were doing, for what purpose, and who it was benefiting. So yeah, really clear to me. Thank you. Sabine, I would have liked to see or to hear a story of perhaps how a family is being, as you say here, dispersed or affected by these developments, right? So we know that this uncontrolled architecture is affecting the social fabric of the communities. Is how, if you could perhaps bring this to life with a story or an example of how how a development, for example, is affecting people's lives. I think that would be a very powerful way to tell that story for people to resonate on an emotional level, and to understand that these new developments are affecting people, really affecting them, and this is how. But otherwise, I was able to definitely understand the intellectual agenda of the research. I think in terms of communicating it is
to the public.
Yeah, in terms of really showing okay, when you say affecting social fabric, that's of course something that, as academics we'd love to say, but what does that mean, But otherwise, thank you so much for sharing. Ronak, I think everyone on the call completely understood exactly not only the importance of the research, but the problem, the context, how you're going about solving it. It was extremely clear that you're helping to, make it known the harms that these immigrants are facing in these families, and actually, by talking about it, you're hoping to reduce the harm and to share these and increase that awareness. So. You're talking to the general public to make them aware, but also these agencies who ultimately can control or have some say in how these immigrants are being treated. So that was very clear. And yeah, thank you so much. And then finally, Pam, with the exception of the RN, with just explaining what that acronym was, it was very clear to me that ultimately you're helping leaders respond to crisis and be more resilient. And you're doing that because long-term care is a field that will face some pretty severe challenges in terms of bed shortages, dementia, increased lack of nurses support. So you know, through your research, you're actually giving these leaders the tools to be more prepared for crisis. So again, for all of you, all of these research topics, I don't know anything in depth about them, but I was able to capture that key message that you can then take with you and communicate to other people, and have that as a skill, you know, in your toolkit. Super. So bang on the dot is now at 12 for you. So how did you find the exercise? Maybe thumbs up or thumbs down in the video. Maybe we can get a yes, a good. People enjoyed it. I know it's a bit nerve-wracking to have a timer that you know, is ticking, but actually, you know, people will be asking you this in any sort of forum, what you're working on. So just feeling comfortable with explaining that in a way that someone can understand immediately, telling that story, I think it's going to serve you very well, and it is serving the researchers that we work with on a day-to-day basis. And we have here in the chat, Elaine, it's great to connect with my teammate and practice. Absolutely. These workshops actually are, you know, an opportunity for you to network, meet other people, learn about other research that's going on at McMaster. Brilliant. So how did we spend our 1.5 hours together? Thank you so much for your time and energy throughout the session. So we started by talking about the benefits of communicating our research, looked at obstacles and challenges. Then we talked about, well, how do we communicate to different audiences? So a few pointers there for you to take away. And then we really honed in on that central research message. And, you know, this won't be just a one-time thing. You'll be honing this research in multiple times. Many times you'll be refining what you're saying. So just keep repeating it and keep finessing it. So moving forward, next week, we have the little video here on the 5 building blocks of a research communication plan. And then in the session itself, if you could download the relevant worksheet, complete as much as you can, as much as you know from it, and then we'll have the opportunity to ask for some advice, any you know, any challenges you had with that, and we'll be looking at more specific concrete elements in the session. Brilliant. So I'm in the chat. I'm putting here a link to the feedback form, and then we'll do the raffle. So I did mention there'll be a raffle at the end, just to reward everyone who has stayed for the full 1.5 hours. I want to just address 2 things, 2 questions that we got here throughout the session. So Alicia mentioned or asked if I could share a resource that I have found useful to create content, and this will help those who work in support staff, but also the researchers themselves. So Canva, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it, but Canva, I'm sharing my screen now with the software. You know, they market it as graphic design for those who don't have graphic design experience. It's a free tool that you can use. I particularly like the fact that you can create designs, A4 documents. They have a bunch of templates that you can use. If you're interested to know more, I can, well, obviously you can explore it in your own time, but I can mention it as well in the next session and give you just a quick tutorial. And then the other amazing thing about it is they have templates and sized material for any social media platform you can think of. So whatever template you want, you can create that. Marketing material, promos, even little videos that you could do. So have a little play around. Obviously, you know, we could spend a whole session talking about this tool, but have a little play with it. Let me pop the link in the chat. It's canva.com. Very simple. It's not Canvas, it's Canva. So without using Pictochart, thinking I may have to switch. Yeah, Alicia, one thing I don't like about Pictochart is that when you export, it says made with Pictochart unless you pay for it. And I'm not, obviously I want to give credit where credit is due, but I just don't think that having that there, you know, it's just, you know, if you can export it without that. So with Canva, you don't have to pay, you export it as a PDF and it's just cleaner, you know, it just looks cleaner. And you know, all of that is free material. They have a lot of copyright-free icons, copyright-free images. So you're not like stealing any designs or anything. You're just using the software and you can export it straight away. And then another question we had from Elaine around how to communicate a problem when it's not seen as a problem. And I think this is, again, a really challenging, tough question. I would always say to find a way to connect with people on that emotional level first, find a way to find that common ground between the people you're talking to And then ultimately, maybe they don't see this as a problem, but is there something else they see as a problem that you could maybe link to, or just find a way to reach them and get through to them? Because we all know that you can't convince someone of a viewpoint if they're just fundamentally, opposed to it, or they don't want to even listen. So I think it's just finding that keyhole where you can go in and say, I know you care about this, and this is something else that you might consider looking into or addressing. So I hope that helps. Okie doke. So we talked about the before I do this, I want to share what you can actually win. So let's stop share and you can see okay, you can all see me now. So Research Retold, for our 1-year anniversary, I wrote a guide on communicating research beyond academia. This is a 30-page document. It seems like a very long document for someone who talks about short, accessible formats, but this is actually a very easy to read visual. Yeah, it's a contradiction. No, it's not. I made sure that this resource is very easy to read over a cup of tea, and you can really just sit there and think about your research and how you can create a 2-page visual summary using Canva. And so I'm going to do a raffle, and 3 of you will get a free copy of this sent to you in the post. Hopefully it will arrive soon-ish or before the next session, but I will be emailing you privately and asking you for the address. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you. I've got here just one final slide, is obviously I'll see you on the 20th of November if you have registered. If not, you can probably not anymore. The registrations are closed, I think, but if I'll see you, I'm excited to see you again. If not, I really hope that you enjoyed this session. Please do stay in touch. Follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn, and yeah, don't be a stranger. If you need any help, if you've got any questions after this session of something that you didn't quite get, or you wanted more clarification on, you can email me. You've got my email address in the worksheets. And yeah, happy to help. Thank you so much. I'll be waiting for everyone to leave the session. And if you have any other questions, you can message me. If not, have a lovely rest of your day. It's evening here, so we'll be ending the workday, but you guys have a whole day ahead of you. So thank you so much, guys.